In the spring of 2023, a 9-year-old boy named Julian sat in his fourth-grade classroom in Atlanta, Georgia, sketching in the margins of his notebook during silent reading time. His teacher, Mrs. Henderson, noticed something unusual about the drawing. It wasn't the typical superhero doodle she expected. Julian was drawing himself in what appeared to be an elaborate costume, complete with detailed patterns she recognized from somewhere. When she looked closer, her hand went to her mouth. The design was unmistakably the Black Panther suit, but Julian had added something unexpected in the corner of the page. A simple note that read, "I remember this feeling heavy but right." Mrs. Henderson asked Julian about the drawing after class. What he told her made her immediately call his mother, Denise. Julian explained, with a calmness that seemed beyond his years, that he remembered wearing the suit. Not pretending to wear it, not imagining wearing it, remembering it. He described the weight distribution across his shoulders, the way the helmet restricted his peripheral vision slightly, the sound his breathing made inside the mask. Then he said something that stopped Denise cold when Mrs. Henderson related over the phone. "I remember fighting while smiling because I knew people needed to see strength, even when I felt tired." Denise Washington had raised Julian as a single mother since his father's death when Julian was 3. She'd always noticed something different about her son, an old soul quality, people called it. But this was something else entirely. Julian had been a casual Marvel fan, certainly. He'd seen Black Panther in theaters like millions of other children, but he'd never shown an obsessive interest. He didn't own action figures or collect memorabilia. His connection to the character seemed to exist on a different level, one that Denise couldn't quite articulate until that phone call from Mrs. Henderson. That evening, Denise sat with Julian at their kitchen table. She asked him to tell her everything he remembered. Julian closed his eyes, and when he opened them, there was a weight in his expression that looked foreign on such a young face. He talked about remembering the pressure of expectation, of carrying something bigger than himself. He described specific moments that didn't match any scenes from the films. Quiet moments between takes, conversations with people he called by first names that Denise didn't recognize, the particular exhaustion that came not from physical exertion, but from emotional labor. "I remember talking to kids who were sick," Julian said, his voice soft. "I remember wanting them to feel brave. I remember my body hurting sometimes, but smiling anyway, because that's what they needed to see." He paused, looking at his hands. "I remember thinking about legacy a lot, about what I was leaving behind." Denise recorded this conversation on her phone. She wasn't sure why. Perhaps some instinct told her these details mattered. Over the following weeks, she documented everything Julian said unprompted. She never pressed him, never led him with questions. She simply listened and wrote down his words. Julian described remembering a specific charity event where he'd met a young boy with leukemia. He recalled the boy's name, Caleb, and described Caleb's parents standing just behind him, both crying quietly. He remembered the weight of Caleb's hand in his own, how small it felt, how careful he'd been not to grip too tight, because he could see the bruising on Caleb's arms from 4 treatments. This wasn't a public event, Julian said. It was private at a hospital. There were only a few people in the room. Denise began researching. She contacted Dr. Michael Patterson, a psychiatrist at Emory University who'd published papers on childhood memory phenomena and consciousness studies. Dr. Patterson agreed to meet with Julian, approaching the case with scholarly caution. He'd seen many instances where children's fantasies blurred with reality, where exposure to media created false memory constructs. But he'd also encountered a handful of cases that defied easy explanation. The first session took place in Dr. Patterson's office on a Saturday morning in June. Julian sat in a chair that was slightly too large for him, his feet not quite touching the ground. Dr. Patterson used no hypnosis, no regression techniques, just conversation. He asked Julian to describe what he remembered about being Chadwick Boseman. Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "It's not like remembering what I did yesterday. It's more like, have you ever had a dream that felt so real you could still feel it when you woke up? But this doesn't fade. It's there in the back of my mind all the time." He described remembering the diagnosis, the decision to keep working, the physical toll that accumulated over months. He talked about remembering conversations with his brothers, by which he meant Chadwick's actual brothers, about faith and purpose and not wanting to let people down. Dr. Patterson documented these statements carefully. He then showed Julian a series of photographs, some of Chadwick Boseman, some of other actors in similar roles, some of locations and people unrelated to Boseman's life. He asked Julian to identify what felt familiar. Julian correctly identified photographs taken on closed film sets, pointing out specific crew members and describing the time of day based on lighting conditions. When shown a photograph of Chadwick with his wife, Simone, at a private moment that had never been published, Julian's expression softened. "I remember feeling safe with her," he said quietly. But the moment that convinced Dr. Patterson this warranted serious investigation came when he showed Julian a photograph of Chadwick Boseman as a younger man, before his acting career had taken off. Julian studied the image and said, "That was before I knew, before I understood what I was supposed to do." Dr. Patterson asked what he meant. Julian explained, "I remember being a teacher. I remember thinking that was my path. I remember the moment I realized I could reach more people, help more people, if I told stories that mattered instead of just teaching about them." Chadwick Boseman had indeed been a teacher early in his career, working with young people before pursuing acting full-time. This biographical detail wasn't widely known, wasn't featured in mainstream articles or in the Marvel films. Dr. Patterson documented the statement. Over subsequent months, Dr. Patterson conducted additional sessions. He varied his approach, sometimes structured interviews, sometimes simply observing Julian during play, watching how he moved, listening to how he spoke. Julian described remembering specific acting techniques, methods for staying present in emotional scenes, ways of finding truth in fictional moments. He talked about remembering the weight of representation, of knowing that millions of children would see themselves in Chala in ways they never had before. "I remember being scared I'd mess it up," Julian told Dr. Patterson during one session. "I remember thinking about every black kid who'd never seen someone who looked like them be the hero. I remember that responsibility feeling heavier than anything physical I had to do for the role." Dr. Patterson contacted colleagues who specialized in past life memory research. He reached out to Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia, whose decades of work documented cases of children claiming memories of previous lives. Dr. Tucker reviewed the documentation and agreed to consult on the case. He noted several elements that appeared in verified past life memory cases: the spontaneous nature of Julian's statements, the emotional consistency, the presence of specific details that could be verified against historical records. Denise, meanwhile, struggled with what to do with this information. She was a practical woman, a nurse who dealt in evidence and outcomes. The idea that her son might carry memories from a man who died only 3 years earlier challenged everything she thought she understood about consciousness and identity. But she couldn't dismiss what she was witnessing. Julian wasn't seeking attention. He didn't perform these memories for others. They emerged naturally, unprompted, and they carried an emotional weight that seemed inconsistent with fantasy or fabrication. In the fall of 2023, with Denise's permission, Dr. Patterson arranged for a meeting with one of Chadwick Boseman's brothers, Kevin. The meeting took place at Dr. Patterson's office, with careful protocols in place to protect both Julian and Kevin. No one had told Julian who he'd be meeting. When Kevin entered the room, Julian's face transformed. He stood up, and for a moment, his posture changed, became taller somehow, more grounded. "Brother," Julian said, and the way he said it carried recognition that made Kevin's eyes fill with tears. They talked for 2 hours. Kevin asked Julian about moments only family would know, private conversations, childhood incidents, family jokes. Julian answered some questions with specific detail, struggled with others, couldn't recall some things at all. The pattern matched what researchers documented in other past life memory cases: clearer recall of emotionally significant moments, fuzzier memory of mundane details. When Kevin mentioned a specific phrase Chadwick used to say, something about purpose being louder than pain, Julian nodded immediately. "I remember saying that. I remember believing it even when it was really hard." Kevin left the meeting shaken but thoughtful. He told Dr. Patterson afterward that while he remained skeptical about past life memory as a concept, he couldn't explain how Julian knew things that hadn't been publicized, details from private family moments. Either this kid somehow accessed information that shouldn't be accessible, Kevin said, or something I don't understand is happening. Dr. Patterson continued documenting the case. He administered cognitive assessments to rule out false memory syndrome or suggestibility. Julian scored normally on all tests. He showed no signs of dissociation or identity confusion. He understood he was Julian Washington, a 9-year-old boy living in Atlanta. The Chadwick memories existed alongside his current identity, not replacing it. In one particularly striking session, Dr. Patterson asked Julian to describe what he remembered about dying. Julian was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was small but steady. I remember being ready. I remember being tired, really tired. But I also remember not wanting to go yet because there was more I wanted to do. I remember people I loved around me. I remember feeling like maybe I did enough, even though it didn't feel like enough. He looked at Dr. Patterson. I remember the moment it didn't hurt anymore. And then it's fuzzy until I remember being Julian. Dr. Patterson documented this statement alongside similar accounts from other children in verified past life memory cases. The pattern of remembering death in an intermediate state before current life memories began appeared across multiple cases in the research literature. As Julian approached his 10th birthday in early 2024, he began noticing the memories starting to fade, another pattern documented in similar cases. The emotional resonance remained, but specific details grew less sharp. He told his mother it felt like trying to remember a dream from long ago. The feeling stayed vivid, but the specific scenes blurred at the edges. Denise documented this transition carefully. She noticed Julian retained certain qualities, a particular empathy for people going through illness, a mature understanding of representation and responsibility, a way of smiling through difficulty that seemed learned rather than natural for a child. In school, when classmates struggled with prejudice or felt unseen, Julian had an instinctive way of making them feel valued that his teachers remarked on repeatedly. Dr. Patterson published a case study in the Journal of Consciousness Studies in the summer of 2024, using pseudonyms to protect Julian's privacy. The paper documented the timeline of spontaneous statements, verification of details, and cognitive assessments. He concluded that while the case didn't prove past life memory definitively, it presented anomalies that warranted serious investigation. The specificity of Julian's knowledge, particularly details not available in public sources, suggested either an unusual form of information acquisition or something more profound about the nature of consciousness and memory. Other researchers reviewed the case. Dr. Tucker noted it fit patterns he'd observed across decades of similar investigations. Spontaneous recall beginning in early childhood, emotional consistency, specific verifiable details, gradual fading of memories as the child matured. Dr. Erlinder Haraldsson, an Icelandic psychologist who'd studied past life memory cases internationally, pointed out that the short interval between Chadwick Boseman's death and Julian's birth, Julian was 6 when Boseman died, was unusual but not unprecedented in documented cases. Skeptics offered alternative explanations. Some suggested Julian had been exposed to more information about Chadwick Boseman than his mother realized, perhaps through internet searches or overheard conversations. Others proposed cryptomnesia, unconscious memory of information acquired through normal means, but recalled as if experienced directly. Dr. Patterson acknowledged these possibilities, but noted they didn't fully account for Julian's knowledge of private, unpublicized moments or his emotional responses during the meeting with Kevin Boseman. In the fall of 2024, Julian started 5th grade. The Chadwick memories had faded to something like distant echoes, present but no longer sharp. What remained was an understanding, Julian said, that some lives touch others in ways that don't end with death. He still drew sometimes, but now the drawings mixed his current interests with lingering fragments of what he remembered. A sketch might show a young boy playing basketball, but the boy wore a small panther symbol on his shirt, a merging of Julian's present and what he remembered from before. Denise kept all the documentation, recordings, Dr. Patterson's notes, the sketches, transcripts of conversations. She didn't know what to do with it all, but it felt important to preserve. Sometimes she reread Julian's early statements, still startled by their specificity. Fighting while smiling. The phrase had appeared in no published interviews or articles. Yet it captured something essential about how Chadwick Boseman had approached his final years. Working through illness, never letting audiences see his pain, maintaining dignity and strength even when his body was failing. Whether Julian truly remembered living as Chadwick Boseman or whether something else entirely was occurring remained, in Dr. Patterson's assessment, unresolved. The case offered no definitive proof of past life memory, but it offered something equally valuable: carefully documented anomalies that challenged conventional understanding of consciousness, identity, and memory. The question wasn't whether to believe in past lives. The question was how to explain the specific, verifiable knowledge that Julian possessed and the emotional authenticity of his recall. Kevin Boseman remained in occasional contact with the Washington family. He told Denise that regardless of the explanation, meeting Julian had given him comfort. "Whoever he is, whatever this is," Kevin said, "your son carries something of my brother. The kindness, the sense of purpose, the way he thinks about helping others. Those things are real, whatever their source." For Julian, as the memories continued to fade through late 2024 and into 2025, what remained strongest was the feeling. Not specific scenes or conversations, but the essence of what it meant to carry responsibility with grace, to fight through pain while protecting others from seeing it, to believe that the stories we tell and the examples we set matter more than our own comfort. These weren't lessons taught to a 9-year-old child. They felt like something carried forward, something earned through lived experience, even if that experience existed in a life he was only beginning to forget. The case remained open in Dr. Patterson's research files. He continued checking in with the Washington family quarterly, documenting the natural progression as detailed memories gave way to general impressions and then to almost forgotten dreams. This arc matched other documented cases, the childhood memories that felt like something more than fantasy, followed by the gradual fading as new experiences accumulated and current identity solidified. On what would have been Chadwick Boseman's 48th birthday in November 2024, Julian asked his mother if they could visit Chadwick's memorial at a local community center. They stood together in front of a mural showing the actor in the Black Panther suit, painted by local artists after his death. Julian was quiet for a long time, studying the image. Finally, he said, "I don't remember everything anymore, Mom, but I remember the important part. I remember that it matters how you make people feel. I remember that strength isn't about hiding when you're hurting. It's about choosing to help others even when you are." Denise put her arm around her son's shoulders. Whether these were memories or something else, whether consciousness persisted across lives or Julian had accessed information through means science didn't yet understand, she knew one thing with certainty. Her son carried something precious forward, a legacy of dignity, purpose, and compassionate strength. Perhaps that was what mattered most, not proving the mechanism, but honoring what remained. As this investigation continues, as Julian grows and the memories fade into the deep background of his consciousness, the questions persist. What is memory? How does consciousness work? Can identity transcend individual lifetimes? The case of Julian Washington offers no definitive answers, only carefully documented observations that challenge easy explanation. It stands as a reminder that the relationship between consciousness and identity remains far more mysterious than our current understanding suggests. If this investigation into past life phenomena and the mysteries of consciousness has captured your attention, subscribe to our channel for more carefully documented cases that challenge conventional understanding. We explore these extraordinary claims with intellectual rigor, treating both the people who experience them and the questions they raise with the seriousness they deserve. Join us as we continue investigating the boundaries of memory, identity, and what it might mean to carry forward something essential from one life into another.